I always thought funerals were about closure, about saying goodbye. But when I buried my husband, closure was the last thing I got. I stood there in front of his coffin, my hand shaking, my heart split between grief and confusion, when a woman I'd never seen before walked in. She wasn't shy. She moved straight to the front, holding the hands of two teenagers. They looked so much like William that my breath caught. And when she whispered, "Goodbye, my love," the church went silent. Everyone turned toward me, the wife, like I was the intruder at my own husband's funeral. Please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. My name is Margaret Hale. And that was the moment my world ended. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just stood there in my black dress, clutching the rosary in my hand until the beads dug into my skin. I'd buried my husband of 27 years that morning, and now I was watching another woman, another wife apparently, say goodbye to him as if I were the one trespassing. The whispers started before the priest even finished the prayer. Who is she? She said she was his wife. No, the older one is the real wife, I think. Every word sliced through the air like glass. The woman, Helena, as I would later learn, didn't even glance at me at first. Her focus was entirely on the coffin, on the man lying inside it. William. My William. The same man who used to make me tea every morning, who kissed me on the forehead before his business trips, who left me love notes in my dresser. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the room was spinning. The priest's voice faded, the music blurred, and all I could see was the way those two teenagers clung to her. His eyes, his hair, his smile. I stumbled out of the church before the final hymn, gasping for air like I was drowning. Outside, the sky had turned gray, heavy with rain. It felt cruelly fitting. I stood by the old stone wall, trembling, as raindrops mixed with tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. I heard footsteps behind me. Soft, hesitant. Mrs. Hale? It was Pastor Graham. His voice was gentle, careful. Maybe you should come inside. We can talk. But I couldn't. I couldn't face them. Not the mourners, not Helena, not the pitying looks that would follow me. So I did what I'd never done before in my entire marriage. I ran from the truth. I drove home in silence, the windshield wipers struggling against the storm. William's funeral suit still hung in the closet. His toothbrush sat by the sink. His slippers waited by the bed. Everything in that house was frozen in time, but yet none of it was real anymore. It was like living in a museum of lies. That night, I sat on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by photo albums and old anniversary cards, flipping through 27 years of memories that now felt like evidence. Every smile, every promise. It all looked staged, rehearsed. I wanted to find a clue, a hint, something that would tell me when it all began. But all I found was emptiness. At some point, I must have fallen asleep on the carpet because I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. Dozens of messages. I thought maybe they were condolences, but no. They were worse. Shame on you. How could you show your face at his funeral? Homewrecker. Other wife. Someone had posted photos of the funeral. Her beside the coffin, crying, holding the children, and me standing behind, expressionless, like some guilty secret come to light. The caption said everything. William Hale's mistress crashes funeral. Mistress. The word didn't even make sense at first. My brain rejected it. I was his wife. We were married in that same church 27 years ago. I had the certificate, the wedding photos, the life built around him. But when the world decides you're guilty, the truth doesn't matter. By morning, my phone was flooded with hateful messages. People I'd known for years stopped responding. My neighbor avoided me. Even the woman from the bakery wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't just lose my husband that week. I lost my name. And still, part of me refused to believe it, right? Some twisted misunderstanding? So I did what any desperate, heartbroken fool would do. I went looking for answers. William's office was still sealed off, his things boxed for review by the lawyers, but I had the spare key. And that's where I found the first crack in the wall of denial. His desk was organized, just as he'd left it. Pens aligned, files labeled, but one folder caught my eye: travel expenses. Inside were hotel receipts, flight itineraries, and meal invoices. Dozens. Cities he'd never mentioned, dates that overlapped with our anniversaries, even birthdays. And one name kept appearing under guest: Helena Foster. I felt sick. Every memory came flooding back: the canceled dinners, the urgent meetings, the late-night calls, every lie I'd brushed off, every excuse I'd accepted, all suddenly lined up in perfect, cruel symmetry. And for the first time, I felt something other than grief. It was smaller, colder. Rage, curling up quietly inside my chest like a snake waking from sleep. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. That night, I lit a candle by the window, the way we used to on stormy nights when he was traveling, a silent prayer for his safe return. But this time, I wasn't praying for him. I was saying goodbye. To the man I thought he was, to the woman I used to be, and to the life that had just been stolen from me. And as that candle burned low, I whispered to the empty house, "You thought you buried your secrets with you, William. But I promise you, I will uncover every last one." I didn't leave the house for 3 days after the funeral. The rain didn't stop either, like the sky itself was refusing to let me move on. Every sound felt louder: the ticking clock, the phone buzzing with unread messages, the creak of the floorboards in that too-quiet house. On the fourth morning, I finally opened the curtains. Across the street, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Dorsey, watering her plants. She used to wave every morning, but when she noticed me watching, she froze for a second, and then turned her back. That small act, that quiet rejection, hurt more than any insult online. I realized then that I wasn't just grieving my husband, I was grieving my reputation, my safety, my place in this world. Still, I had questions. Questions only one person could answer: Helena. It took me 2 days to find her. Her name appeared in the receipts from William's office. One of the addresses matched a mortgage notice in his files: a small house 2 towns over, purchased under his business account. I drove there on a Sunday, the folder of evidence sitting in the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. When I pulled up, I didn't know what to expect. I'd pictured her as cruel, manipulative, the woman who'd stolen my life. But when she opened the door, she looked just as broken as I felt. Her eyes were swollen, her hair unkempt. Behind her, I could hear a TV playing quietly, and a young girl's voice saying, "Mom, who is it?" Helena stared at me for a long moment before whispering, "You're her, aren't you?" I said softly, "Yes, I'm Margaret Hale, William's wife." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The color drained from her face. She stepped aside slowly and gestured for me to come in. Her house was modest, lived in, kids' drawings on the fridge, laundry folded on the couch, the kind of warmth I used to have. She poured 2 cups of coffee, her hands trembling. She said finally, "I didn't know about you," she cracked on the word you, "not until the day of the funeral." I studied her carefully.
There was no smugness, no guilt, just raw confusion and pain. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "I swear it. He told me he was divorced, said his wife left years ago, moved abroad. He even showed me fake papers once. I didn't question them." My chest tightened. "And the children?" Her eyes filled with tears. "His, both of them." The words felt heavy, final, like the ground itself had shifted. We sat there in silence for a while, two women bound by the same betrayal. I should have hated her, but I didn't. She wasn't the enemy. He was. William, the man who split himself in two and made us live with the pieces. Helena wiped her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "People are saying awful things about you online. They think you were the other woman." "I know," I said bitterly. "It seems easier for them to blame me than to believe he fooled us both." She looked down at her cup, her voice trembling. "He promised me he'd make things right before the end. He was sick, you know." I frowned. "Sick?" She nodded. "Cancer. He didn't tell you?" I shook my head slowly. "No. He hadn't told me. He'd gone on his business trips even while dying." My hands started to tremble. Helena sighed, her voice barely a whisper. "He said he didn't want to hurt anyone. He just didn't know how to stop lying." The irony made me laugh, a small, bitter sound that startled us both. "He managed that, didn't he? He hurt everyone, anyway." She didn't argue. She couldn't. When I left her house that evening, the sky was turning orange, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. The pain hadn't gone away, but something else had taken root. Clarity. For the first time since the funeral, I knew what I needed to do. Not to destroy Helena, not to lash out, but to reclaim what he'd taken from both of us. The next week was chaos. The will was being processed, lawyers contacted me, and gossip spread like wildfire. His so-called second family was the talk of the town. People whispered in the grocery aisles, at the post office, even in church. I became the face of scandal. The day of the will reading, I arrived early, determined to hold my head high. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Helena was already there, sitting quietly, her children beside her. She didn't look at me, but I could feel her presence. Not hostile, just heavy. When the lawyer began to read, the words blurred until one sentence caught my full attention. "I, William Hale, leave the majority of my estate, including the family home, to my lawful wife, Margaret Hale." The room went still. Herlena's face crumpled. Her son stiffened in his seat. The lawyer continued, but I couldn't hear. All I could feel were eyes, everyone's eyes, boring into me. When the reading ended, Helena rose from her chair, trembling. He said he left everything to the kids," she whispered. I wanted to comfort her, but she backed away before I could speak. "You already took his name. Now you have everything else." Her voice broke, and she left the room. The door shut with a sound that echoed far louder than it should have. For a long time, I sat there alone, staring at the will in my hands. I didn't want the money. I didn't want the house. I just wanted the truth. But that's the cruel thing about truth. It doesn't come as comfort. It comes as consequence. By the time I got home, someone had painted "liar" across my front fence in red. Spray paint. Sloppy. angry. I stood there under the streetlight, staring at it, then walked inside without cleaning it off. I didn't care anymore what they thought. The real story wasn't out yet, but it would be. Because William might have fooled everyone while he was alive, but I was still here, and I was done being silent.
In the weeks that followed, the world around me became a courtroom I never asked to stand in. Every neighbor, every coworker, every so-called friend had something to say, and none of them cared to hear my side. People love tragedy when it's simple, a villain, a victim, a clean ending. I didn't fit that picture anymore. When I walked into the grocery store, conversations stopped mid-sentence. When I attended Sunday service, the pastor's wife avoided eye contact. Even my son, Daniel, came home from school one afternoon with tears in his eyes. "They said Dad had another family," he whispered. "They said you knew." That broke me more than anything. I knelt beside him and took his face in my hands. "No, baby," I said softly. "I didn't know. I promise you, I didn't know." He nodded, but I could tell. The seed of doubt had already been planted. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, bank statements, property deeds, emails. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I couldn't rest until I understood how deep William's deceit went. It started with small discoveries, transfers made to shell accounts, a fake consulting firm, purchases under aliases. The man I thought I knew had built a life out of mirrors, reflecting only what he wanted me to see. But amid all that, one line on a statement caught my eye. Wire transfer, $25,000, Foundation of Hope Scholarship Fund. I frowned. That wasn't one of his usual fake charities. I searched the name online, and to my surprise, it was real. A small nonprofit that gave scholarships to underprivileged kids. A part of me softened. Maybe he'd tried to make amends in his own way. Maybe guilt had finally caught up with him. The next morning, I drove to the foundation's office. It was a modest building tucked between a bakery and an auto shop. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and lavender air freshener. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s, greeted me warmly. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm looking for information about a donation from William Hale." She checked her files and smiled faintly. "Yes, I remember Mr. Hale. Kind man. Helped sponsor one of our brightest students last year." I hesitated. "Do you remember the student's name?" She flipped a page, then said, "Helena's daughter, Lucy." The world seemed to tilt. My chest tightened as realization washed over me. So even in his guilt, even in his final months, he'd tried to make things easier for them, for her. Not for me, not for our son. I thanked the woman and left quietly. That night, I stood by the window watching the rain fall again, just like it had the week of the funeral. I thought of Helena, of her children, of the pain we'd both inherited from a man who couldn't tell the truth. But as I watched the raindrops race down the glass, something changed in me. The bitterness began to lose its grip. I didn't want revenge in the way people imagine it. No shouting, no destruction, no chaos. I wanted something quieter, something that would undo the pain rather than repeat it. That's when I remembered what William had always said about me, how I was too soft, too forgiving, too trusting. He was wrong. Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means refusing to let someone else define your ending. The next morning, I started making calls. I hired an accountant, a quiet man named Mr. Lewis, to help me trace every hidden asset. It took weeks, but eventually we found it all. Offshore accounts, hidden properties, insurance policies under false names. The man that had left me broken had also left me power. "Mrs. Hale," he said one afternoon,
sliding a file across the desk. You could liquidate everything and walk away. Or you could reallocate it. Reallocate? I asked. He nodded. To something that matters. Something that lasts. That night I thought about it long and hard, and by dawn I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I reached out to Helena. It took courage to make that call. She didn't answer the first time, or the second, but on the third try she picked up. Her voice was guarded. "What do you want, Margaret?" I said, "Peace, and maybe a chance to make this right." There was silence. Then a quiet sigh. "After everything, you still want that?" "Yes," I said. "Not for him. For us. For the kids." That conversation lasted hours. We cried, we argued, we sat in silence, but by the end we found something neither of us expected. Understanding. We decided to create something together. Something that would make the world remember us not as victims, but as women who refused to stay broken. We used part of the estate, the money that had once divided us, to start a fund. A scholarship program for children who'd lost parents to deceit, addiction, or abandonment. We called it the Second Light Foundation. When the first scholarship letter went out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. It didn't erase what happened, but it turned the ashes of our pain into something that might help someone else heal. And maybe that's the quietest, most powerful revenge there is. To build something beautiful out of what was meant to break you. It's strange how time softens the edges of pain. You don't forget, you just stop bleeding from the same wound every day. 3 years passed after William's funeral, and the world that once felt hostile and cold began to open up again, little by little.
The scholarship fund grew quietly. What began as 2 women sitting across a kitchen table, shaking from exhaustion and heartbreak, became something that changed lives. Letters started coming in from students, stories of survival, of resilience, of hope. Some of them wrote things like, "I thought my life was over after my father left us, but your foundation gave me a second chance." Every letter felt like a small piece of my soul being sewn back together. But healing has a strange way of drawing attention. The same neighbors who used to whisper behind my back suddenly wanted to reconnect. The same local news outlet that called me the mistress now wanted to run a feature on 2 women turning betrayal into hope. At first, I said no. I didn't want to reopen wounds for publicity. But Helena, she looked at me across the table one morning and said, "Maybe this is how we reclaim the story, Margaret. Not for them, but for us." So, we did it. We agreed to an interview. I'll never forget walking into that studio. The same town that once shunned me now had my face on posters. A story of forgiveness. Cameras, lights, microphones, things I never imagined would point in my direction. The reporter asked all the usual questions. How did you discover your husband's double life? How did you overcome the hate? Do you forgive him? I answered honestly, but not dramatically. I told the truth the way it felt inside me, heavy, quiet, and human. I used to think forgiveness meant letting someone off the hook, but I've learned it's more about freeing yourself from their shadow. You can't heal if you keep living in the dark. When the interview aired, it spread faster than I expected. People from all over sent letters and messages. Some of them said they'd been through something similar. Others just wanted to say thank you. But not everyone was ready to forgive me. One evening, as I was locking up the foundation's office, a woman approached me. She looked familiar, one of Helena's daughters. Her face was cold, angry. "You're not a saint. You're just trying to look good now." I didn't argue. I just looked at her and said, "You're right.
I'm not a saint. I'm just someone who's tired of hating. For a moment, her expression softened. Then, she turned and walked away. That night, I sat outside on the porch with a cup of tea and my dog curled at my feet. The stars were faint, the air cool, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled without forcing it. You see, revenge doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes it's just showing the world you can still love, still live, still rise, even after they buried your name under lies. I found new peace in small things, painting my fence white, tending to roses in the yard, reading to children at the local library. Helena and I met every Sunday for tea. We didn't talk about William anymore. There was nothing left to say about him. One afternoon, she brought a box with old photographs, some from her life, some from mine. We laughed at how different yet similar our lives had been. Two women living parallel lives. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" she asked me. I shook my head. No, because then I'd still be blind. That Christmas, her family invited me over for dinner. It was quiet, warm, full of laughter and light. Her daughter, the same one who once glared at me with hatred, handed me a plate and said almost shyly, "I'm glad you came." I smiled. So am I. That moment, that single, gentle acceptance meant more to me than any apology ever could. Years later, people still ask if I regret forgiving him, and I tell them the same thing. Regret belongs to the past, but peace lives in the present. Maybe that's the real revenge, not destroying what hurt you, but outliving it, outlasting it, turning it into something so unrecognizable that it can't touch you anymore. When I walk by William's grave now, I don't feel rage. I feel distance. Like standing on the shore of a storm I've already survived. I place a flower there sometimes, not because he deserves it, but because I do. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have burned it all down, or tried to build something out of the ashes? Be honest. Would you have waited this long for peace? It's been almost 10 years now since that day at the cemetery. The day my life cracked open and spilled everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. I live in a small cottage by the sea now. It's nothing fancy. White walls, blue shutters, a small garden full of wild lavender and rosemary. The kind of place where mornings smell like salt and forgiveness. Some days, I wake up before dawn, make tea, and sit by the window watching the tide roll in. The world feels softer here. The past doesn't echo as loudly. Helena lives about 15 minutes away. We still see each other, not out of obligation, but because it feels right. Two women who once shared the same heartbreak now share quiet mornings, homemade bread, and laughter that doesn't need explanation. People still find our story online sometimes. The video of that old interview resurfaces every now and then. Strangers write to me, asking how I did it, how I forgave, how I moved on. And I always tell them the truth. I didn't forgive for him. I forgave for me. Because you can't build a life while standing in ruins.
I keep one photo of William in my house, not the man I buried, not the man I discovered through lies, but the man I once loved before the truth unraveled everything. He's smiling in that picture, holding a fishing rod at Lake Monroe. Back then, I thought that smile meant happiness. Now I see it differently. I think it was relief. Relief that someone still believed in him. Sometimes I talk to him when the sea is quiet, not like a widow missing her husband, but like a woman who's made peace with her ghosts. "Do you see what you left behind?" I whisper. "Do you see what we became despite you?" And in those moments, I feel something like gratitude, because if he hadn't lied, I might never have found the truth about myself. You see, life has a strange way of giving back what it takes away. Not in the same shape, not in the same form, but in something truer, something earned. I used to think revenge meant making someone else hurt. Now I understand it means reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to destroy. Helena and I still run the Second Light Foundation. We've helped hundreds of students now, children who remind us that loss doesn't define you unless you let it. Some of them come back years later, grown, thriving, smiling with the kind of hope we once thought we'd lost forever. And every time one of them thanks us, I see the full circle of it all, how pain can plant seeds that blossom long after the storm is gone. Last summer, one of those students invited us to her wedding. She said, "You gave me a second chance at life." Helena squeezed my hand and whispered, "Looks like we did something right, didn't we?" I smiled through tears. We did more than right. We survived. Now when I walk along the beach in the evening, I don't feel the old ache anymore. I feel strength in every step. The water touches my feet and pulls away gently, as if the ocean itself is saying, "You've let go." I still wear my wedding ring sometimes, not out of love or loyalty, but as a reminder of who I was, who I became, and what I refused to lose. Some nights, I light a candle on the porch and watch it flicker in the wind. It reminds me that even small light can survive the darkest storms. So when people ask me what I learned, I tell them this: forgiveness isn't about letting someone win. It's about choosing not to keep losing. Peace isn't something you find, it's something you build, piece by piece, when you decide you deserve better than bitterness. And love, real love, isn't about perfect people or flawless trust. It's about staying open to the world even after it breaks you. That's how I found myself again. Not through vengeance, not through justice, but through grace. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever looked at the ruins of your life and wondered how to start again, know this: you already have everything you need inside you. Just breathe, just begin, just live. And maybe years from now, you'll look back like I do, not with pain, but with quiet pride, because you didn't let the worst thing that happened to you become the last thing that defined you. Please give this story a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing it from. I want to know how far this little story of healing and revenge has traveled. And remember, revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's peace.